Hello, Comic Collectors Guild members. Happy New Comic Book Day. This is Wes, also known as Comics Addicts on Instagram. Welcome to Come Together, the show that spotlights Comic Collectors Guild membership. And today we have a special treat. Two individuals from the Comic Collectors Guild. We have Noah from Dallas, Texas, and Carl from Columbia, Maryland. How are you guys doing?
Doing great.
Fantastic.
The reason both of you on today is because you both run the Instagram Play With It podcast. It's nice to see you. This is my first time doing two different people in two different states, so new milestone reached.
Is this legal?
We'll see. I'm not
handsome,
100% sure yet. Sorry, Noah, what did you say?
Double the handsome too. So
Oh yeah.
it's good all around.
I would say triple the handsome.
Oh, fair
Fair.
enough.
He was probably excluding me.
Yeah, there we go.
All right, guys, thanks for coming on today. And we're going to start off today the way that we always start off these interviews, and that is to have you explain your collector's journey, how you got into this hobby, when did it start for you, how has it progressed, that sort of thing. Noah, would you like to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's hard to pinpoint an exact time, but if I was really forced to, I would say that my journey started when I was 6 or 7 years old. My grandfather gave me a stack of Red Sonja comic books, and he told me these are probably worth a lot of money because comic books are worth a lot of money. They weren't, but I was like, oh wow, well I need to keep a hold of these and take care of them. And I read them a million times and they fell apart. But that was probably what started for me, like the drive to want to hold on to things and collect them.
And how did you progress through the years?
Oh man, so I think the next step was my grandpa. He was really the pusher. He got me a box of secondhand GI Joes for Christmas one year, and that was great. And then as I grew up, I just started getting way more into comic books, collecting. Toys kind of fell away, and they didn't start coming back until I was a groomsman in Carl's wedding, and he got me a Mezco Judge Dredd toy. And it was so cool. I didn't even know they were really making toys that cool. And now I have a room full of toys. And my wife makes fun of me all the time because of it.
Sorry, man.
That's what wives are for, really. That's what wives are for.
Right.
Keep us in check.
Okay, and you, Carl, tell me about your collector's journey.
It's funny because you don't really think about where it starts. So when you ask the question, I really had to dig deep, and I changed the answer like about 3 different times. So I've always been a collector of something as a kid. I don't know what started what, but I can definitely tell you that you would walk, in the early mid-90s, you'd walk by comic book shops, and there'd be little mom and pop stores. And I know that we got to stop in, and I was always aware of Batman and all this. You had action figures and what have you as a kid. And I remember they had like one of those 25 cent, 75 cent bins where you would go through whatever just was worthless. I thought it was really awesome. So that kind of stuck in my mind. And then you'd go to the grocery store, and they would have these like poly bags of like 3 or 4 comic books and maybe a trading card, and they would like call it like a collector's kit or something. And so I know that I begged my mom a couple times to like get me one of these, and they'd be just some really just worthless like Spider-Man comic that you like with Tombstone on it or something. And like it just one of those, it was a low value comic, but it would be a mix of different stuff. And that kind of sticks in my mind too, because I just love the artwork. I was gravitated towards just the artwork. But what probably started me from going from just kind of dabbling to being, okay, I need to get into this. I actually had an uncle that gave me his comic book collection that he had as a kid. And there were like 60s like Superman, and like he would have some of those like Dell comics, like the like westerns, and what was it? the Phantom, just a lot of like just a weird mix. And so when I got that box, I'm like, I'm rich. They're in terrible condition, and I don't actually think they're worth a whole lot. And I still have pretty much all of them. But the ones that were, they're all bagged and boarded and in the collection. But I think that that's what started as like, okay, I'm going to take care of these. Like, this is serious now. I have really cool stuff that I never thought I would get. And I mean, it was probably like 50, 60 comics, but that probably started that journey for me because it had that instant collection kind of fell into my lap like that.
And how did you progress from there?
Well, I would say the next real big leveling up I did was in young adulthood. I got my own eBay account, and that's what really ruined my life. It was different when you said, "Hey, Dad, can you buy this for me on eBay? Can you put in a bid for me?" And then it turned into having my own paycheck and my own eBay account. So I remember buying some like big lots of like DC Comics, a lot of like the Night Quest Batman stuff, and a lot just easy to get to comic books that were abundant. But I was like, look, I can get all these comic books for really cheap. So I think things like that. But I didn't. And then I finally started actually reading them as a young adult, where I was like, all right, like I have them because I think they're really cool, but I didn't really spend a lot of time like reading them, looking for the stories and everything. So then that I appreciate it on the two different levels now, where it's not just really cool artwork that's sitting in a stack somewhere. I'm enjoying the stories. I've always enjoyed the stories like in the movies and like one-off stuff, but I think that's fully. And then toys, same thing. eBay, it's all this guy's fault. This toy right here. This was my very first action figure that I can remember. I got it when I was like 3 for Christmas, and I since traded it as a 10-year-old or whatever to some kid for another toy. But that was the first purchase I made on eBay where I was like, I missed that toy, and I wonder if I could get it again. And that was when like eBay was really new, and you're like, you can find anything. Let me find this thing that I've been missing for so long. And I mean, I got it for like $10-15 new in the package, and I just never opened it. And that's probably what started my whole action figure collection, because like I can rebuild my my childhood with this, and I can even make it better because I can get the things that I couldn't get. So then I made Noah I gave him that Judge Dredd so that he could also feel my pain of how awesome toys can be. So that's my long-winded answer.
Thanks,
on that.
Carl. Thanks.
Yeah, I know it's my fault. It's his fault for some things I'm into. So
I was very interested in a point you brought up about actually reading the comics, that you were collecting. It's so funny now to be my age. I mean, I'm not ancient or anything, but I've been collecting for most of my life, well over 40 years since I was younger than 10 years old. And it's so funny to go back into old comic books and reread the stories that you may not have understood when you were that age.
Yeah,
but they take on like a whole different meaning now that you're older. There's like layers to it. And you're right. It's like I'm not a speculator. I don't buy just to buy. I like to read. I like good stories, and I have my favorite writers and artists. But I think that's an interesting point you bring up. Are you a married guy, Carl? Like
I am a married guy. Yeah. So then she's pretty supportive of my vices. I know. That's why I had to marry her. But yeah, we've actually been together. Holy crap, 17 years. But then we've been married since 2016, whatever the math is on that. So we grew up together.
I didn't do that math for.
Yeah, there you go. Sure. It changes every year. So, but yeah, it's so since we were like teenagers when we met in high school, sweethearts, it's an easy evolution of all the things that I got into, because I've always kind of been into that stuff, and then it just grown from there. So it wasn't like a blindsiding, like, oh wait, you're into this stuff. It's like, yeah, I know. It's more of an eye roll and a move on. So
How about you, Noah? How does your lovely bride react to all this?
She's fantastic. I mean, I say she pokes fun, but it's really in the most lighthearted, like, kind way. She really supports really any activity that I pursue that makes me happy. It makes her happy. So I feel like I'm very lucky, because I know there's some relationships that are a little different where I guess I always like the common trope on television was always like, oh, you get married and then you give up everything you love and you do what your wife wants, right? Like that's what you see on TV over and over and over again. And so I feel like while it shouldn't feel like a special lucky thing, everyone should have that sort of relationship. I feel very lucky that I have a wife who's just like, yeah, do what makes you happy. That makes me happy. So
Now we're not going to tell our wives who are probably watching this video right now that we just did that like 3 times to get that answer. Okay, so you guys know each other. You're in different states. Did you grow up being friends in another place?
who wants to take that one?
I can take it.
Okay.
Yeah, so Carl and I met probably Carl, 11 years ago?
2008.
Okay, yeah, so 12 years ago. I was in a band with another friend of mine, and Carl had done some recordings out of his house. He was a recording engineer, and we asked him to do some recordings for us, and he ended up joining the band and then becoming one of my best friends. And so we've been friends ever since. And that was actually like I ended up moving away about 3 or 4 years ago, and that was one of the big driving factors behind us making a podcast together, so we could remain good friends and like hang out all the time. And then just like making a podcast is cool too, but really it was just we wanted to hang out. So
I want to add to that. All that's true. It was one of those things where we would call each other almost every day and kind of just go through we would talk about we'd nerd out on stuff essentially. And I guess I got the idea while we were kind of talking with each other, like, I bet other people would be interested in us saying the things that we're saying. I don't know. Maybe they're not. Maybe not. But it was one of those things like, this could be entertaining enough that someone else might want to hear, like being a fly on the wall and our shenanigans.
I usually find that those are the thoughts I have when I'm a little altered with my friends and we're all laughing. And I'm like, we should write a screenplay together.
Yeah, unfortunately, the way my brain works, that's completely sober, and I have these ridiculous ideas. But I'm a man of great ideas. It just takes sometimes not all of them are great. I have great ideas with a lot of not great ideas in between them. So it's been able to keep us on kind of a schedule on making sure, like no matter what, like we have this project we get to work on. We wrote music together, and we played shows together. So when you have that bond with someone, you want to create something, but it's one of those things where it just became kind of hard for us to do music in 2 different states. While it's possible that it's hard to create that mojo, but when you're able to just like, well, hey, we can have that connection talking to each other, and then we can record it, and then we can put it out and talk about, like, because there's all these other podcasts. People are interested in knowing what other people are doing with their collections, what they're into. We're not a news source, but we'll cover stuff that's up and coming and that what have you. But it's really more about our takes on it, our hot takes on it. And we reserve the right to completely change our mind in the middle of talking about it, and we explore all the different thoughts on whatever the topic is, and we enjoy it, and it's been a great project, and we really like to keep that going.
Well, let's talk about that podcast. It's Play With It podcast. Can you just tell me about how it's going, what sort of things you're doing, what kind of things are coming up? Anything you'd like to say about it?
Yeah, sure. So we released our 9th episode, so we're pretty new to it. but we're almost a year in on starting the project. There's a lot of like setup and trying to figure out what we wanted to do. And I think we launched in about November. And then we keep it about a month at a time, and we do around an hour a month for releases. So we cover toys and board games. Essentially, it was like we kind of wanted to go the path of least resistance. It's like, what do we already love and talk about all the time? So let's go ahead and do that. And I think we have a basis of comic books, our backgrounds with, loving comic books and reading them and collecting them. So it kind of permeates, even though it's not like a major topic of discussion on our podcast. We'll probably explore it more as we go. But all the toys and like action figures that we tend to talk about, they all are comic book based for the most part. Like I don't even know if we've even talked about anything that's not actually comic book related. So we love those characters. The most recent episode was an interview with David Arshofsky, who was a major sculptor that sculpted a lot of the Ninja Turtles toys from the 80s and 90s. And he's a toy designer now as well, working on his own designs. But back in the day, he cut his teeth on those figures that we all love and at least have some sort of memory of either playing with them at a friend's house. Because that was for me. I didn't actually have a lot of Ninja Turtles, maybe one or two, but I had a friend that had it all, and it was just like awe-inspiring. And these are so cool, and you're looking at the detail and everything. And then to be able to, we got the opportunity to talk to David and get a very boots on the ground, like what it was like during that time, and just to let him know that we're huge fans of what he did, even though like those guys didn't get recognized. They were salary dudes that just were employed by a sculpting I was going to say an agency. What do you want to say? A sculpting firm that was commissioned by Playmates alongside another. There was like two studios that were pumping out these sculpts that were getting passed to Playmates. And then they would, have some back and forth, and then eventually you'd have figures. So that's a well-celebrated line. He worked on a bunch of other stuff too, but you guys should check it out if you ever get a chance. It was a lot of fun. It was our first interview, and it didn't suck. So
that's what I go for. That's my standard as well.
Absolutely. That's my litmus test. This didn't suck at all. He carried us completely. It was delightful. He had a lot of great stories, and it was just great to hear. And a lot of like just the insight into like, the thought process and everything. It's like, wow, this is really cool.
And Noah, if I understand correctly, that you've taken it one step further, and you actually have started sculpting or creating your own toys, correct?
Yeah, so I started November of 2018, I believe. Started designing and sculpting my own toys out of clay. So I don't know if it's like common knowledge, but it's pretty popular right now in a lot of collecting communities for people to make resin bootlegs. So they make copies of popular famous toys out of resin. And I just happened to stumble across some stuff like that on Instagram, and it just inspired me, and I started designing my own characters and sculpting them and producing them. And it's been great. I've really loved it, from like designing the packaging all the way to like painting the toys. It's been a lot of fun.
Do you do that? You say you do that in clay, so you don't do any 3D printing or anything like that?
No, I finally started exploring 3D printing and 3D sculpting, but my first 6 releases were all traditionally sculpting clay. If anyone wants to check it out, it's grimdarktoys.com. You can see some of my work there. But I am very interested in getting more into 3D printing. It's just I don't know how many things I have the time to become an expert at, right? So like I took a lot of time learning about sculpting and mold making and all of that stuff. And I just don't know that I have time to also learn what I need to know about 3D printing. So if anyone has tips, please reach out and let me know.
I don't know. These days, we might have time to do just about everything.
That's true. That's true. Well, working in IT as I do, I have a little less time probably than your average person, but I'm sure I could find the time if I really wanted to.
We've both been fortunate enough to have essential jobs, but it's also kept us from doing a lot of the enjoyment piece of the quarantine. It's more like you just go to work and then you go home and then that's it. You don't have any more time. You just now don't do the fun things anymore. So that's kind of, we've had a kind of but we're super thankful to have, the essential jobs. I did get to work from home a little bit during peak season recently, but now I'm back into the warehouse and I'm wearing, all the PPE with the mask and everything every day. And it's not, the most fun, but we were kind of hoping that we could pump out more content during, downtime, but we've actually been more busy. So, but we're gonna get back to it.
So we've reached the part of our interview where I'm going to ask you gentlemen to highlight 3 parts of your collection, whether it's something that's monetarily valuable or has specific meaning to you. What's your first, Noah?
The first piece of my collection that I'd like to highlight is I was lucky enough to get an original animation cell from Fist of the North Star for like a very decent price on this sketchy website that I don't even know like how they got it, but it's one of my favorite pieces. I do collect comic books, but really what I enjoy more is like the original art and stuff like that. Same with like animation and toys and stuff like that. So that is probably one of my favorite pieces of my collection. I have 2. One is from the main show. It's of Ken lounging around. It's not like anything spectacular, but for some reason I really love it. He's got his arms behind his head and he's like kind of doing the like Japanese handsome man sort of deal. He's showing off his muscles a little bit. And then the other one is of Rao from, I believe it's from the movie. He's punching something really hard and he looks really angry.
Okay, and what is your second item you'd like to highlight?
So I'm a really big fan of the Warhammer 40K universe. And actually one of my earlier collections was collecting all the rule books. I've actually only played the game twice, but I love the rule books for the art and the stories. I'm really into art, if you can't tell already. But and one of the things that I was lucky enough to get is an original, the original production art for from a source book they made in the 80s called Realm of Chaos, which is a pretty desirable book, has fantastic art in it. And I was able to get an original piece from that of some like sick mutant dudes. And I love looking at it every day.
And your final piece?
So usually when I first get into a new collection is when it's the most dangerous to my wallet. And I just recently started getting into Street Fighter 2 G.I. Joes. And coinciding with this new obsession, someone posted a bunch of test shots of those G.I. Joes on eBay for sale. And so I was lucky enough to get a test shot of M. Bison. And if people don't know what a test shot is, it's basically a pre-production copy of the toy that they use to test safety standards and articulation and things like that. And so I'm really happy to have that. Don't look on eBay to see how much I paid for it, please. But yeah, that would be my third.
Okay, so let's go over to you, Carl. What is your first item you'd like to highlight for us?
All right, so I'll start with the most cut and dried, and then we'll get into the more descriptive stuff. So the first thing is my Spider-Man 300 issue. Basically, I kept purchasing from a guy on eBay, and he was just unloading all of his stuff. He was just later in life and had a lot of like 70s, 80s comics, and he's like, "Hey man, I noticed you like bid and almost buy everything that I post. So like I have some stuff if you want to just like talk offline. I know that that's not eBay standard stuff, but I was like, yeah, sure. So I made some other purchases from him, and one of them was the Spider-Man 300. I thought I'd never be able to get it. I'm a big Venom fan, and I always thought he looked really cool in the comics and stuff. So I got it for a good deal. It was ungraded and everything. It was just loose, but he kept really good condition. All of his stuff in really good condition. And I think I paid about $90 for it, maybe like 5 years ago. Yeah, like $90. He was giving me a little bit of break. It wasn't these days, obviously, but it wasn't that long ago. I don't remember exactly, but let's say, 2013, 2015, I don't know, somewhere between there maybe. So I went to a con and did a submission to CGC because it was in such good shape, and I just like, I got to get this graded. And it came back in 9.6, and I was just like, this is the collector dream. Like, you get a good deal on something. Like, he paid, shelf price for it back in the 80s, and he got what he felt like was a good deal. Like, he named the price and I bought. Like, it wasn't like I haggled it down. And then it was in great shape. And then I submitted it. I did not get it pressed. And I bet you, now that I think about it, maybe I should resubmit with the press. But it's in great shape, and I'm really happy to have that. But that's just kind of just a cut and dried collector's dream scenario for me on that one.
I gotta say, I always get a little tear when I hear about that. Part of my collector history is that I lost my collection in a fire, and that's one of the books that I had. Actually, I had multiple copies of it.
Of course you did.
So whenever I see one, I'm like, oh, I want to kind of like recapture my youth and get that, but I can't justify it, and my wife would probably kill me. Although I have asked many times, I'm like, if you ever want to get me a good birthday present or Father's Day present or Christmas present, but she always forgets. I'm like, I forget that thing you wanted, so I get you this instead.
Well, I have a bonus answer because you brought it up. Something that I had was my age group. We were big into Pokemon and the Pokemon card craze. And it's just a quick story, but basically we had a year 2000 party that no one came to because everybody was really scared. And the one person that came brought their like foster son or whatever he was. And he brought his Pokemon cards, and he basically left, and then I could never find my Charizard, Venusaur, or Blastoise after we met. And I'm 100% sure he stole them from me. And I could not convince my family because I had a messy room and all this stuff, but I kept my collection pristine that kid stole them, and they would never confront him. So that hurt my heart so bad. And as time goes by, and it's more expensive, it's harder to find. That's always been something that I've carried with me, like you have with your comic book. But I saved up and bought, I would say 2017, around there. I went ahead and bought a full complete set. I did have a guy give me the Charizard. I had a guy I worked with. He's like, I don't want this. Take it. And I was like, are you serious? He's like, yeah, it's fine. And then I'm like, that was a big like win. But then I bought the rest of the collection, and now I have the full first series, and I'm whole. It made me more whole, and I'm telling you this because that will make you more whole. Like I know that, like, so I hope that one day you get a hold of that book, even if it's just a beater. You need to have it because those things you'll carry on forever.
Someday.
Yeah, it might not fill the entire hole in your heart, but maybe just
little
bit.
No, as a collector, it's never fully whole, but it made me feel a lot better.
Listen, man, you don't want to know the books I lost in that fire. I go through a price guide, and I just want to cry sometimes.
I know.
First appearance of Punisher, first appearance of Wolverine. Like I was collecting throughout the early 70s into the 80s before that fire happened. So, well, let's get away from that painful.
Sure.
Topic.
I'll give you my second highlight. the Pokemon one didn't count. That was a freebie. So I went to a con and picked up the first appearance of Moon Knight
Oh, you
because
son of a bitch.
I'm sorry. I know. So here's the problem. Here's a little backstory. Noah got me into Moon Knight when we first met. He brought over his comic books. I think I purchased the run that David Finch and I can't remember Houston, last name Houston, wrote a line like a series for Moon Knight. It's not a really old one. It's like late 2010s or so. No, I guess probably just late 2000s. It's a really cool run. He's like, dude, check it out. And I got really into it, and we both were Moon Knight fans. And so we're probably, by the time I saw the book at the con, it was not that hot of a book, but it was a key book. I got it for $200, and it's probably about a 6 or a 7 grade. And it was a lot at the time, and I grabbed it. And then now with like all the speculation with the show and everything, it's now astronomical. And Noah's waited and waited to get that book, and he feels like he's never going to get it. And I have it, and I feel a little, what was the word? I'm sad and empathetic that he doesn't have a copy.
So
but I am sending it.
Right?
No, I'm actually sending it to CGC to get graded impressed. But I love that book, and I know that it's unobtainium for me now, price wise. So I'm just really glad I made that gamble, because like I was at the end of the con and I still had a little bit of money to burn. I'm like, man, $200 for a book is like a lot of money, and especially young adult, and I think maybe we just started living on our own, so it wasn't like money was in abundance, but we saved up. And so I was like, I've been a good boy all con. I'm going to grab it. So it paid off. I'm happy to have it. But I feel bad that he's the one that got me into it, and that I'm the one that has the first appearance. So that's
friends.
Number
stay
2.
Friends regardless.
Yeah, we
okay.
have.
And what's the final object you'd like to highlight?
Okay, and it segues into the final one, is my Moon Knight sketch by David Finch, which is from that series that I mentioned. I love his art. It's very like 90s Jim Lee style with a lot of cool details. It's kind of the quintessential like 90s style drawing that I grew up with and love. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we loved that series of Moon Knight so much. I went one year to get some signatures from him, and I was thinking about, I heard he did commissions, and I was like, my dream is to get a commission of him doing Moon Knight or Batman. It doesn't matter. I need some caped, insane guy. That's my criteria, and he draws the best caped, insane people. So that's what I went with. The problem was there was a guy up front that was having him draw a triptych drawing with full color and everything, and taking up everybody's time. And we didn't even, I think we were able to get in, but I spent the whole con in line to get this little sketch. I just wanted a sketch, a small one, and I was able to get some signatures, but that guy later was gloating about how great it was, and he follows him from con to con and gets him to draw all these things for him. And I'm like, all right, cool, man. And so I was like, I'm determined I'm going to get this thing. So I got the early in pass the next year. And my wife and I, we were in line. We got there at like 7 o'clock in the morning, and it's supposed to open at like 10 or something. We're in that special line. We paid all this money. And the guy that took up all that time was behind me by like 5 people. And I was just so happy. So we beelined, and we were first in line. And I got a sketch, that sketch that's my favorite. And then my wife got Wonder Woman, because he was working on a book with his wife, David Finch, and I can't remember his wife's name, but it starts with an M. They worked on a book together for Wonder Woman, and she got a sketch for that. And we just felt so vindicated that and that guy was behind us in line. What a jerk. But that's
Success.
My third favorite. Yes, my third favorite. Maybe my first favorite, but that's my third one.
Oh, it is the stories that make this job so satisfying.
Yeah.
So Noah, is there any one character in any of your fandoms that you connect with the most, that you find to be like almost like a role model or someone that you really stand by?
So I actually found this uh, question really interesting because I don't know that like the way I perceive like fandom and fiction that I ever directly like compare myself to the characters that I enjoy. But I would say like if I had to really like choose one, like if there was a character that I would want to be like, I guess more to kind of like twist that, it would be Captain America. Just doing what's right and working hard and trying to make sure everyone's doing well. I think I would love to say that yeah, I am like that, but that would be probably a little much. So I'm kind of twisting your question a little bit to say like if that was the character, that would be the character I would want to be the most like.
If there's anything that we do here, it's twisting. So that's good. How about you, Carl?
Well, first, I just want to say that's a great answer. And I do think you hold a lot. That's kind of your spirit animal. That
Oh,
doing
that's
what's
nice of you
right
to
is
say.
so important to you, but you're not like Superman Boy Scout. Uh, so I think it's great. That's a great answer. Um, for me, I'm kind of similar in Noah that I don't like. Oh, I don't read a character and say that's me. But the one that I feel like that I identify with, like I empathize with, would probably be Batman. But also he's my favorite, so it's kind of really easy. It's kind of a low hanging fruit for me. But I I was thinking about it, and I just love that he does. Even though he's super rich, when you compare him with everybody else, it's all about he has no powers. It's just a matter of being very intelligent, using what he has at his disposal to try to do what he believes is right, but it might not always line up with what the law says is right or whatever, like, but at the end of the day, he's got rules and a code, and I feel like I aspire to that. Also, we can all kind of identify with, especially in the collecting community and comic book nerds, and just we all kind of have those moments where we have that loner vibe, and we can connect with someone that's a bit of a loner, um, and that it's okay to feel that way. And I think, and then also he's got demons that he's always trying to. He's not perfect and doesn't say he's perfect, and I think that we can all identify with that too. So there's just so much in that character that I kind of see. And then you live vicariously through him beating up the bad guys. And so I think there's just, while he's my favorite, I think that I identify the most with Batman.
So Noah, can you tell us a good collector-related story that sticks out in your mind?
Yeah, I actually have a good one with Carl that we kind of talked about on our podcast. So they started doing Generation One re-releases of Transformers at Walmart, where they meticulously recreate the packaging, the toy. They use the same molds, and one of the ones that came out that was very people were very excited about was Soundwave. Soundwave is my favorite character, so from Transformers. So I had to have it, and Carl really wanted it too. And when it started coming out, or when it was announced, everyone wanted it. And with these Generation One re-releases, people would buy out the entire store and then throw them on eBay. Like that was just a thing that had happened for the previous ones. And so Carl, I knew I had to have one, and Carl wanted one too. So before it came out, I went to Carl and I was like, "Hey, Carl, let's make an agreement. We'll both check Walmart's in our area, and if either one of us finds them, we'll buy two and then ship one to the other one." And Carl was like, "Yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do it." And so the time came when it started trickling into stores, and I was stopping at 2 or 3 Walmarts a day on my way home from work. and telling Carl, "Oh, I didn't find it. I didn't find it. How many Walmarts did you go to?" And Carl was like, "Oh, I haven't gone to any." And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "Yeah, I mean, when I have to pick up groceries, I'll look, but like I didn't commit to looking every single day like you." And I was like, "Well, that's against the spirit of our agreement. Our agreement was we were gonna find it, and like we were both gonna look. Not I was gonna do all the looking, and if you happen to find one, you know, laying around in your house, then you would get one from me." And so that was just very Carl. That was a Carl move, I have to say. And so what I did is I went on I forget if it's Cybertron or one of the Transformer Collective websites, and I found a guy who lived in my area who was also looking for Soundwave. And I was like, "Hey, like we're both looking for Soundwave. It's hard to find. Let's find it. And if I find it, I'll buy one for you." Same thing. And this guy, his name was Manny. Manny said, "Yeah, sure, no problem." Well, weeks passed, and I couldn't find Soundwave. He was starting to show up in Texas. Finally, I get a text from my best friend Manny, who's actually looking for Soundwave as far as I know. And he says, "Hey, I found some Soundwaves. I picked one up from me. Here's the store if you want to go get one for yourself." I was like, "Oh, Manny, like you're betraying me too." And then like the next day, Carl was like, "Hey, I stopped by this Walmart and they had Soundwave, so I picked up two." So Carl actually ended up coming through for me. Yeah, we got our Soundwaves. And then to get Carl back, I actually found him local and I bought it so instead. So then now Carl is stuck with two Soundwaves.
And
So,
Manny, if you're out there, you suck.
Oh yeah, and I told him as much on our podcast too. I might have used a little stronger language.
you did. I've seen the flaws in letting you tell this story. But it's mostly true. But I think you're giving the connotation that I didn't actually actively look. It's just that I hadn't gone to the store yet, and you were so overly into going to get it. I wasn't going out of my way as much because I was checking BrickSeek every day, so it didn't say that they were there. I checked several Walmarts. I just wasn't as gung-ho about it as he was. But sure. I did get them. I bought 3 of them, one to keep in the box, one to open, and one for Noah. And I have 2 extra just sitting on the shelf. And they made plenty of them, by the way. They made plenty of them. They weren't hard to find.
Yeah.
And it was just we got them really early because we were really worried about it. It's Noah's favorite. I'm glad he got it. So at the end of the day, it worked out. But the back and forth on – because he's like that coach where he's like, "Yeah, you're not going to do it. You're not going to find it." And then like I'm like, "No, coach, I'm gonna bring it to the end zone." And then I did. And like, "Okay, cool, man. Thanks, man. That's awesome." I took pictures. I like did a reveal. I texted him like this, like, "Hey, I got one." And then I took a picture. And then the next picture was 2 of them. And then it was 3 of them, so you could see that I got enough for us. That was a good kind of a collab story, even though you bent the truth a little bit on there, but that's fine.
The truth is relative to the person who witnessed the event, so that's my truth.
Okay.
All right, Carl, set us up with your story.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out how to tell this. So Noah and I's friend group is I've had some of these friends for a really long time. One of which I've known since grade school, and his name is Pierce, so we'll call him Pierce. And he was a neighborhood kid. We were into the Pokemon cards together, and we were, I don't know. So we're like 12, and I got it in my head that I was going to prank him. So what I did was I had the wrapper to one of the new sets that just came out, Pokemon set, and I stuffed it with crappy cards and I taped it back up, and I wanted to give it to him just to get a reaction out of him. This is my 12-year-old brain thinking that this is going to be hilarious. And so I go to his house and we're hanging out, and I'm like, "Here, man, I got you this." He's like, "Oh, okay, cool." And by the way, Pierce is a very quiet, reserved, non-reactionary person. So he's actually the worst person to do this to. So he opens it and he's like, "Oh, okay, cool. looks at it, and he's just confused. I'm like, yeah, man, they're not even the right cards. And so it just didn't go well. And I felt bad. I was like, this was a stupid idea, and I shouldn't have done it. So for whatever reason, that's been carried. Like the fact that I felt like I played a crap prank on him for so long. We were hanging out at my house way more recently when Noah and I were in a band, and I was drinking and heavily, and I just for some reason we were chatting, and I was like, man, I told him about it, and I was like, I feel really bad about it. I still feel really bad about giving the Pokemon cards to Pierce. It was insensitive of me, and so I called him up, and he's like out, and we're adults, and I'm like, hey man, I'm really sorry about this. Like, do you remember when I did this? He's like, no. Well, I just want to say that I'm really sorry about it, and like,
did you drunk dial him?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I did. I 100% drunk dialed my friend Pierce, and I still feel bad about it. I feel bad about it for two reasons, but he thought it was hilarious.
Sure Carl and I were hanging out in his basement. I was sober. I forget why Carl was like very drunk. It might have been even the very first time I'd seen him drunk.
It was.
And he's like just sitting there like talking about it like, man, I feel so bad. I need to tell him. I need to tell him to get this off my chest. And I was like, yeah, call him. That would be hilarious.
They're the worst people. They egg that shit on. So I did. I was like, yeah, man, I'm going to call him.
One can only hope that Manny experiences the same level of guilt that you did, Carl.
I hope he does. Hey, Pierce, if you're watching this, I'm really sorry about the Pokemon cards. I know you don't care and you're tired of hearing about it. I bring it up a lot now. So
we'll make sure that we give a shout out to Pierce. So Noah, tell us, what's the one grail item that you would like to have for your collection? What are you looking for?
I don't know if you're going to believe this or not, but it's funny. Carl brought up the first appearance of Moon Knight because that's for sure what I have written down is the first appearance of Moon Knight for a reasonable price.
I'm sorry, but this is the problem when you have two guys who've been friends for a long time. It's like going to the restaurant and I just happen to order first, but we're going to get the same item. So that's kind of the scenario.
Yeah, I've been a fan of Moon Knight for a long, long time, and Carl kind of already told the story, but that is the one that kind of keeps me up at night when I look at the prices. Though I've looked recently and it looks like they're coming down a little bit, maybe because the show's been pushed back. I'm not sure. But that's the one that keeps me up at night where I'm just like, I mean, is there a reality where I could get that amount of money and spend it? Yes. Should I? No. And then I think about all the times I saw it for much cheaper prices and I was like, oh, that's a little expensive. I'll wait. Not knowing what was coming. Well, who could have known, right? Like, especially back in the day, who could have known that like Marvel would take over the world and like everyone would love Marvel, not just like a niche group of people, right? So
who's your casting choice to play Mark Spector?
I actually think Daniel Radcliffe is a great choice. He's a fantastic actor. He does like a lot of cool avant-garde stuff. One of my favorite movies is Swiss Army Man that he's in. I love that movie. So I think he'll do great. I can't think of anyone I would rather have.
So you're not in the Keanu Reeves camp?
I love Keanu Reeves, but I feel like I want someone who could be less of a like Keanu Reeves is good at being Keanu Reeves, and I love that about him. I want someone who can maybe bring something I haven't seen to the table.
Carl, what's your grail? What are you looking for?
I don't really have. So the short answer is I am a huge 1989 Batman fan, so I would love some sort of prop from the movie. I saw a cowl go for like 10 grand a few years ago and I would have never been able to purchase it anyway, and it was dry rotted. A more obtainable goal right now is to get a reproduction one. I know there's a lot of really cool guys out there that are making cowls that are like movie spec. So that's on the list, and they're not horribly expensive. So when the timing's right, I'm gonna get that. But I would like a prop, like a Batarang or something that's like literally this was in the filming. That would mean a lot to me, and I think that's probably it's my favorite movie of all time. So it's not the best movie of all time, but it's my favorite, and I would love to have something from that.
All right, so you guys have both brought up Batman, the 1989 movie. You brought up the upcoming Moon Knight, Noah. What are some favorite movies and TV shows related to the comic industry?
So I had to make a little bit of a list. Favorite is hard for me. My tastes kind of vary, but I think consistently a movie that I come back to is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. It's just so perfect, like a blend of like cheesy comic books, but like adult themes and like I love that movie. That's probably the one that I would say is my favorite consistently.
How about you, Carl?
That's a great answer, and that's in my top. But back to 1989 Batman, that's my favorite movie. So that's always going to be kind of what I grade everything towards. But other ones of mention is if we were going to talk about like Marvel and what they've recently done, I loved Guardians of the Galaxy. I loved taking a bunch of relatively deep cut characters, putting them all in a movie and having really good writers and actors involved and just really killing it on that. And that like sci-fi action comedy subgenre is very up my alley. So I felt like they did a good job on that. And then along the same lines, Thor Ragnarok, which I actually don't care about Thor at all. And it's one of my favorite Marvel movies for sure. It's so comic booky, but it didn't feel hokey. It kind of poked fun at itself. The colors and like that like 80s like bright vibrancy. So out of like recent memory, and if we're talking Marvel, those would probably be my picks. But 1989 Batman is my favorite of all time. So
Yeah, it's amazing what will happen when you give a huge budget to an indie sort of like director who really knows what he's doing. Taika Waititi is just like an amazing person, but also, you know, his comic timing and his sensibility, it just made that movie something that was really, really fun to watch.
Completely agree.
So both of you have been talking about toys, and we discussed your favorite movies and television shows. Have you watched The Toys That Made Us on Netflix?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Those are tremendous. I recommend them to everybody who will listen to me.
Right.
If you love nostalgia, you love those toys from the 70s and 80s. I thought the Ninja Turtles one was excellent. I thought even the He-Man and the Masters of the Universe one was so good. Which one was your favorite?
He-Man had the most impact for me. What about you, Noah?
Probably the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles one was my favorite.
Sure.
But what I find interesting about that show is it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like it's really cool that like more people get to learn about the history of those toys. But what the flip side of that is very much like what happened when Marvel started getting popular is then all of a sudden realized like, oh, hey, I need to own that now. And the prices just started going up and up and up once the more popular that show became. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, but a great show. Like I really like it.
Yeah, that's probably a tie for my first favorite. And we were starting to collect the first 10 figures. I think you're collecting some of them, but I was trying to get them all. Oh no, okay. I was trying to get all the first wave of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles toys mint on card before they because before they were around like anywhere from like $30 to $60. And that show alone just drove the prices up so high that you're like looking at like $100 a turtle, and it's just like, man. So towards the end, I was getting one of the last ones. Splinter was one of my last ones, and I got one that's kind of a little bit on the yellowed side, but still mint on card, and it's a good figure. But I definitely paid more for it. I was waiting because it was one of the cheaper ones. Him and April O'Neil were like used to be like $30 all day long, like a year or two ago, and yeah. So it's definitely, and we now try to be a little more careful about what we're currently collecting now because we don't want to tell everybody what we're currently getting into, because then we don't have that big of a pull or anything. But still, you get enough people. We already have to compete with each other on eBay bids. I don't really need our listeners to also be trying to buy the items. So
well, actually, on our last eBay Live, I showed one of the Street Fighter GI Joes that I started getting into, and like almost immediately, one of the people watching was like, "Oh, I need to collect those. I'm gonna go on eBay and like find them." And I was like, "Oh, great!" Like just more competition.
Our Instagram Live, and he's like, "Well, I instantly regret showing that off." I was like, "Dude, probably not that serious."
Maybe I should have waited though. I definitely moving forward. I'm gonna wait to show off what I'm into.
We got to sandbag it until we're almost there, or finished it. Yeah, I'll agree with that.
Noah, do you have any non-comic or collecting related hobbies?
Yeah, so I've been into writing music for quite a while. Carl and I have done that actually quite a lot together as well. I also really enjoy like hiking, backpacking quite a bit, doing some outdoor stuff. It's kind of interesting because I found that like the groups of people that I know who are into like hiking and the backpacking circle don't necessarily, there isn't a lot of overlap in that Venn diagram with the people who are really into comic books and board games and toys. So it's almost like I have to have like two separate groups to talk about that sort of stuff. But those are some passions of mine outside of like collecting and stuff for sure.
How about you, Carl?
I just live in the nerd universe so much outside of just working. I don't really know. Music is the other thing. I still work on some stuff here and there. I'm a little bit on a sabbatical, but I've just recording, doing the podcast. I mean, that's literally like outside of, even though we talk about those things, I handle the production and the editing and the posting of it. So all those like technical pieces of it, I used to audio engineer. So that was a nice way to kind of put all my hobbies in a bag and just mix it all up real quick. And then that's essentially what our podcast is, because like it checked so many boxes. It's like, I kind of have to do this because I like, all of those pieces of the puzzle.
Okay, Carl and Noah, we've reached my favorite part of the interview where I ask you to disclose an embarrassing comic collector story, or just collector story if you like. So who would like to be the first victim?
I'll go first. So it pretty much involves both of us, but we text constantly. And when we get into something new, we're like, "Hey man, I'm getting really into this thing," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's really cool." So I would say a couple years ago, Noah kind of is like, "Hey man, I've been looking on eBay, and like Power of the Force Star Wars figures are still dirt cheap. It's just everything is really cheap, like mint on card, like unused. They're just, and we grew up with those figures, so I was like, wow, that's really interesting. Yeah, I'm gonna look at some stuff, and so we were both kind of scouring eBay and kind of checking out what was out there. And I know that I just off of our communication, and he kind of got me pumped for him, and he was getting pumped for him. I made a few purchases, but there was this one item, like I don't remember if we would chat about it or not, but I got it in my head that I needed one of the speeder bikes from Return of the Jedi. I had one as a kid, and I loved that toy, and God knows where it went. I think that, Noah, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't that like break apart, like if you ran into something?
Yeah. It would explode.
Okay, yeah, okay. Just make sure to make that up. So with all that, I was like, this is deep nostalgia, and they're not that much. And I was looking on there, and there was a auction ending soon, so I bid on it, and then I got outbid. And then I bid again, and then I got outbid, and we're like just seconds left, and I lost it, and I was kind of bitter about it. It went too high. And I think they snaked it right at like 1 second mark. And I was like, So then I went to go complain to Noah, and I said, dude, I almost had this speeder bike, and some asshole just snaked it from me. And then he's like, dude, that was me. I bought it. I was like, wait, what? He's like, we have to coordinate these purchases because we can't be each other's competition. So I was like, that's a really good point. We just happened to find the right one. We started getting nostalgia for the toy. I'm sure that we were playing up like, oh yeah, that was a really cool toy and all this stuff. And we both found that auction and bid on it. And he won. He's got it. So.
Well, funny end of that story that you might not know, Carl, is I got it. I opened it. I was like, this is fairly cool, but I bet my nephew would like it more, so I gave it to him.
Oh. All right.
Ow,
well,
twist the knife a little bit more. No,
yeah, I didn't even really want it.
So I think the embarrassing. So I know my wife jokes quite often that I spend more time talking to Carl than I do her, and like he's actually my wife, or vice versa, and so just stuff like that where we get so in sync. Like just reinforces those jokes, and it can be a little embarrassing.
Yeah.
Noah, what's your embarrassing story you'd like to share with us?
So this one might be a little much, but when I was
we like
young,
much around here.
Yeah, I must have been, I don't know, I was young. I have a hard time pinpointing exactly my age, but I was pretty young, and I was dabbling in Legos, which anyone who's listened to our podcast knows that I think Legos are for serial killers. So I hesitate to even tell the story because people are going to be like, what are you talking about? But I was really into Legos. I liked the Lego men and women, and I had a little collection of them. And I had one that was my favorite. And for some reason, I like to keep him in my mouth. And my mom noticed, and she was like, what are you doing? And slapped me on the back of the head to get me to spit it out. And I swallowed it. And I was so distraught about it that I somehow convinced my mom to look through my poop every time for like 3 days until we could find it. And we found it. She cleaned it off and she gave it back to me. What I don't remember what I don't remember is if I still kept it in my mouth after that.
I'm hoping that broke the habit, but we don't know. You blocked it out.
Oh my God. Yeah. Oh, that's great. All right, guys. Well, it's been great hanging out with you today and talking to you. We've reached the end of our interview. I was wondering if there's any final words you'd like to give to the Comic Collectors Guild members that might be watching the video. Noah, would you like to go first?
Yeah, well, thank you for doing this. This is a super cool thing to do. And thank you to the guild members, to any that are watching. Like, appreciate it. And I know one of the things Carl and I have really talked about is bringing comic books more into our podcast. Our podcast is kind of focused more on toys and board games, as I'm sure a lot of people can tell. That's kind of our focus. But comic books were the beginning for both of us and have always been a consistent part of our lives. So if any of the guild members have ideas of like segments or things they would like us to talk about, I would love to know what the comic community would be interested in listening. And just thank you so much to everyone. I know I'm grateful every day for like one person listening to our podcast. And really, I'm actually ultimately just very grateful to be able to hang out with my best friend, and like that, again, one person might be interested in listening to us hang out. So thank you, everybody. And thanks for having us, Wes.
Carl?
Man, now I'm following up like a really good, oh man. Well said, man. I don't know. I guess just to reiterate that we appreciate the guild accepting us, and I kind of run on this hypothesis that we're all kind of cut from the same cloth, and these, like, a lot of this stuff is more connected than what I wouldn't say media, but you got your little cliques. You got your board game clique, and you got your comic book clique, and you got your toy clique. And I submit that most of us, at least a large enough group of us, like all that stuff, and or at least can appreciate a lot of it. And I feel like a unifying of that. Like we used to have stores, and some still probably exist in certain parts of the United States, where you would go and buy your comic book, your board game, and your action figure all at the same place. And those stores like cater to all of us. And I kind of like to mentally think about our podcast being kind of a representation of like, hey guys, like we're not all like we don't have to be in these cliques if we don't want to be. Like we're multifaceted, three-dimensional humans that like a lot of different stuff, and I think that a lot of those things are related. And I am happy that I think mostly I'm right. That it's the feedback that we've been getting from people, but we want to be more inclusive too. Like he said, we're not doing as much with comics yet, even though when we talk about action figures, they're always a comic book character, and we can't help but mentioning it. But we would like to actually do formal segments related to comic books, and we haven't figured out quite yet how to do that. So we're going to start experimenting. But yeah, we'd love to hear from everybody. Give us a listen. We just want to be interesting and have a good time. Maybe you'll learn something, but we're not necessarily educational. You'll learn what we like, I guess. but just, to continue to build the community and be a part of all the communities. So, yeah.
Well, I love ending on a positive note. Noah, Carl, again, it was a pleasure to meet both of you. Thanks for being on Come Together, and we hope to hear from you really soon again.
Thanks. Really appreciate you taking the time. Have a good one.
Stay safe out there.
And that's a wrap for Come Together, the show that spotlights membership for the Comic Collectors Guild. If you would like to be spotlighted for our show, please send me a message in my DMs on Instagram at Comics Addicts. You can also contact our administration. Their handles will be at the end of the video. The Comics Collectors Guild is an open forum for all collectors and fanboys. Regardless of who you are and what you love, you are welcome to join for free. Just contact one of our administrators for details. It doesn't matter if you are a lover of cosplay or if you're an artist, writer, inker. If you love Doctor Who, manga, Lord of the Rings, anime, all are welcome to join. Please consider subscribing, leave us a like or a comment down below, and we'll see you next time.
You get kids at a certain age where they're so oblivious, like you are like them. Like I had a kid, this is a really funny story. It's like one of the first visits I made, and this kid was like really cool kid. He was really funny and asking a million questions. He's like, can I ask you a question? Yeah, he's like, could you beat up my dad? And I just like lost it because he was so serious, and I was like, I mean, I could, but I was like, that is not what we do. Like, we're nice to everybody. And, but it was so funny because he was so serious. He was like, could you beat up my dad? And like,